Hello guys, welcome to my new video, and today there's some exciting news. Corruption vendor is here to some extent. Blizzard has listened to a lot of the feedback and basically have decided to remove some RNG from the RNG of the oranges of the oranges. Corruption, you can buy effects and apply them to the same extent you can apply things like enchants. Now, there is still some RNG because the corruption vendor will have specific corruptions available. Not all of them, and it's going to rotate, from what I remember, twice per week or something along those lines. So there is still some weirdness attached to it. Also the Echoes of Nyloto, which probably if you play on your main character who has all the essences on them already, you probably have 0 of this. Echoes of Nyloto is going to be used to purchase this. So there are a couple of gripes about this, but let's be happy. Corruption vendor is here, and all of a sudden this is gonna cause more issues, because I wanted to make this video straight away because I know people are going to be super confused about, hey, I can buy basically any corruption on my healer if I do Mythic Plus, if I do raiding. What should I go for? And believe me, there is a lot of scenarios there, or there's a lot of corruptions out there that can be perceived as biz for Mythic Plus and raids, and this is what this video is going to try to achieve. It's going to try to give you a better understanding of what corruption is going to be really good for your specific healer in Mythic Plus and in raids. But because of how corruption, sometimes biz corruption is going to be based on your highest stats, it's not always going to be guaranteed. So this is to some extent a bit of a prediction video. So first of all, let's go and have a look at my very professional spreadsheet that I made. I spent a little bit of time on this. I wanted to highlight what corruptions are going to be good. So you can see here you can see a corruption for Mythic Plus, corruption for raids. You can see my stats for raids, Mythic Plus, and all of the healers here, including Mistweaver Upwelling build, Mistweaver Rising Mist or Fist Weaving build as well. So now, first of all, I want to go through some of these. I want to go through this spreadsheet and basically talk you through my thought process, because this is not 100% guaranteed. This is my predictions of what people are going to try and get as healers in Mythic Plus and in raid situations, depending on what you want to achieve, DPS or healing. So first of all, I want to talk about the best stats. This here in raids is very simplistic look of stat priority for healers. A lot of the times, I would say that going highest item level is going to be the best. For example, I put that for Resto Druid because the stats are so close to each other that just going highest item level is going to be one of the best ways. I could have said the same thing for Discipline Priest. I could have said the same thing for Holy. I could have said the same thing for a lot of healers, but generally speaking, I want to simplify this and pick the 2 best stats or whatever, to some extent. So you can see here, Resto Shaman, crit versatility is the best in raid situations, mainly because of a couple of reasons. Crit and verse, they're always going to be good. They're always going to increase your healing no matter what. Mastery, while it's great for progression as a Resto Shaman, it loses a lot of value once you start doing farm content or if you start overhealing people. For the people who don't know what Resto Shaman Mastery is, you're going to heal more if the person is lower HP. So if you're bringing 5 healers for your, for Rathian or something like that, and all of a sudden you're overhealing, no one is going to dip low and your mastery is going to lose value. To the same extent that haste, for every single healer out here, haste is a very super solid stat, but the more haste you have, the more spells you cast, the more mana issues you have. So someone who's progressing content right now, haste might have less value. Paladin is the exception here, maybe Discipline Priest is the exception here, but certain healers have exceptions to this, but haste usually will lead to more mana issues. So generally speaking, there are going to be healers here who are looking at this and they're like, hey, I'm doing farm content, I just want to go for logs. And all of a sudden, maybe Resto Shaman, haste is going to be really strong because they want to get better logs. So keep this in mind. So generally speaking, this is my stat priority for the healers. Very simplistic version. Take it with a pinch of salt, whatever. Shamans, crit verse, Discipline Priest, haste crit. To the same extent, haste crit is also going to be very strong in Mythic Plus. Holy Priest, mastery crit, because mastery is, or it's equal. Mastery is very strong. Crit is very strong because the bigger heals you do, the bigger mastery hot you get. So they kind of work together. Druid, I put all because I feel stat priority for Resto Druids in Mythic raiding or raiding in general is generally close together. My personal opinion, my personal testing, for my Resto Druid, crit might be a little bit better than everything else, but I do like to go a little bit haste as well. If I don't have mana issues, if I have Blessing of Wisdom, if I have external innovates, I enjoy haste a lot to get better results. But at the same time, if I were looking at some of the stats, I feel crit might be a smidgen better than everything else, but generally speaking, all stats are pretty good for Resto Druid. Holy Paladin is the one where you really want to go a lot of haste, a lot of mastery. They're working really well. Mastery is really strong for Holy Paladin on stacked fights. If you look at Nihilota, you can see that basically majority of, or at least half of the raid is going to provide a lot of stacking, and Mastery becomes really strong. And haste is generally strong because of, like, you know, applying glimmers, reducing the cooldown in the Crusader Strike, getting more Holy Shocks out. I know Glimmer has an 8 cap. I know Glimmer has a cap associated with it, but haste is still a very, very solid stat. Now, Monk is a bit more difficult here because you have the Upwelling build. Upwelling build, generally speaking, crit and verse are going to be your very like Resto Shaman. Crit verse, always gonna give you a nice increase to healing. Haste, you might have mana issues. Haste has a lot of issues with Upwelling build because their main spell, Essence font, does not really work that well with haste. This is why haste is not that, or not perceived as that good of a stat for Upwelling. And Mastery, at least from my testing, I've seen Mastery dipping below crit and verse in general mythic rating as a Upwelling monk. Now, Renewing Mist or Rising Mist Fist Swimming build has gone through a lot of changes, has been nerfed multiple times, or at least received a big nerf. It used to be that haste was the absolute king of it, but it got nerfed to an extent that I feel that haste, crit, and verse are relatively equal in what they're trying to do. There is a specific amount of haste that you kind of want to go for, but I don't want to talk about this right now. Generally speaking, Mastery is going to be less value because you're going to be spending less time casting your Vivifiers, because you'll be spending more time hitting the boss with your little punches and stuff like that to get your Rising Sun kick resets. So this is my stat priority. And now, this stat priority is going to correlate or going to be linked up with the corruptions that you might need. This is why I'm talking about stat priority, because, again, you need to know what stats are going to be strong in order to see what corruption you're going to get. Master is going to lose a lot of value because it provides no damage boost. This is what a lot of higher end Mythic Plus healers are going to value their stats based on, because Mastery gives no damage output. To some extent, you could argue that Mastery still has very high value to Resto Druid, because Mastery is one of the best throughput stats. So balancing the amount of haste you have and the amount of Mastery you have as Resto Druid is an ongoing battle that you can spend weeks and weeks and weeks of trying to figure out. A lot of the times my gear sets have like 18% Mastery, 20% Mastery, 16% Mastery. Like, I have 5 different builds depending on the affix, depending on how much healing I need to do, depending on what tank I do. So just save yourself the trouble, and a lot of times just try and go highest item level depending. But Master is going to lose out a lot of value. I didn't want to put in a specific stat priority for Mythic Plus because I feel I will be misleading a lot of people based on what playstyle they're trying to achieve. I'm assuming here you're a healer that's trying to output some sort of a DPS. Because you see here, Corruption Mythic Plus. There is one corruption that's kind of winning it all. And that is Gushing Wounds. For the people who don't know what Gushing Wounds is, your damage spells and abilities have a chance to cause your target to ooze blood, dealing a specific amount of damage over 7 seconds. It's a dot. It's basically a dot that is by many considered to be the best per corruption DPS increase for basically all of the classes out there. You'll probably see a ton of classes stacking Gushing Wounds in PvP, in Mythic Plus, and in raid situations. Now, you'll notice that certain other classes like Fire Mages will be stacking Masterful, which is a master increase, and BM Hunters will be stacking Crit, but that's a different story. Gushing Wounds is going to be one of the best, and you'll probably notice if you watch MDI. If you watch MDI, you'll notice that a lot of the Mistweaver monks or any of the healers would stack as much Gushing Wounds as they can, because the damage that it provides is absolutely insane. It's only, if you noticed, it's only rank 1. It's only rank 1 and it's 15 corruption. So you're going to have to apply it on a lot of pieces. And second of all, The scaling is based on the item level. Damage dealt by infinite stars, twisted appendages, and gushing wounds is now based on the item level. So guess what? If you go to an auction house and you start seeing rings 475s, their value is gonna, I don't know, double. It's going to increase. The pure item level gear is going to increase a lot because, you know why? Because Blizzard messed up to some extent. If you cleansed a current item, you cannot apply a new corruption to it. So basically, you're going to be doing raids until they're going to fix it. You're basically going to be doing raids and hoping for the gear to not be corrupted so you can get a really high item level and apply gushing wounds if you're doing Mythic Plus. That's what you're going to be hoping, and like I mentioned, non-corrupted high item level gear in auction house is going to have a huge increase in gold costs. Keep this in mind, guys. So gushing wounds extremely strong for every single healer. To some extent, I feel Holy Paladin is going to go between gushing wounds and ineffable truth. Holy Paladin, or at least ineffable truth, is extremely strong for Holy Paladin because of how their cooldowns work. So I feel you might go between the two depending on how much damage you want. Now, Twilight Devastation is a very strong DPS corruption as well for a lot of healers out there. The fact that Twilight Devastation is somewhat random, or at least sometimes you mess it up. For example, as a Holy Priest or a Discipline Priest or Resto Shaman, running Twilight Devastation when you're ranged and you're kind of far away from the mobs, there's a high chance of it getting wasted. There's a very high chance of getting wasted. Now, if you play a Holy Paladin or a Rising Mistweaver where you always stand close to the mobs, Twilight Devastation is going to be, there's a less chance of getting wasted. But generally speaking, because of Twilight Devastation has a chance of pulling extra mobs, it's random, it works less well on like non-fortified weeks because, you know, if the mobs are fortified, they last for longer, higher chance of a proc, or at least there will be a higher chance of a proc. This is why Gushing Wounds is going to win. It's just consistently good damage. It's consistently good damage. Gushing Wounds is going to be very, very strong for every single healer. Now, I'm not 100% sure on Rising Mistweaver if Ineffable Truth is going to be worth for them in Mythic Plus. I'm not 100% sure, but I feel Gushing Wounds is going to win out. So first of all, Corruption in raids. This is where there's a lot of it's going to be hard to find the best stat or the best corruption for you to go. So first of all, Flash of Insight. I'm not 100% sure if this is going to be available. Now, for the people who know Flash of Insight, for the people who play like Resto Shamans, Mistweaver Monks, Holy Paladins, they know what Flash of Insight is because it's an axe from Chestergar. Now, an axe is not usable by other healers like Druids and Priests and things like that. So they don't know how strong Flash of Insight is. It's basically an intellect boost, a substantial intellect boost that is very, very, very strong and is not available to every healer. Like I mentioned, it's a Chestergar axe. So if this is going to be available as a purchasable corruption, it's going to be pretty much based for nearly every single healer that values intellect. So your Shaman, your Discipline Priest, your Holy Priest to some extent will use Flash of Insight but might want to also look at Ineffable Truth, and we'll talk about that. But your Druid will want Flash of Insight. Paladin will probably still want Ineffable Truth because guess what? Paladins use Glimmer of Light. Glimmer of Light does not scale with intellect in any way whatsoever. So all of a sudden, intellect boost is not going to be that good for Holy Paladin in raid situations. You'll still want to stack your Ineffable Truths. But to the same extent, in Mythic Plus, you might even would consider. There's a reason why a lot of high pushing Paladins use Flash of Insight Axe for Mythic Plus. Because in Mythic Plus, Glimmer accounts for less damage, Glimmer accounts for less healing, Intellect is more important because it boosts your damage as well, or you want more damage. It all depends on how you value your damage. But generally speaking, Ineffable Truth, Flash of Insight for Upwelling, Flash of Insight. I feel Rising Mist Monk in Mythic Plus is going to be your go-to choice. I don't think a lot of monks are going to be running Upwelling in Mythic Plus keys. So to some extent, I don't know if I even want to include this in Mythic Plus scenario. But in raids, I still feel Flash of Insight is going to be very strong for all of these. Generally speaking, biz corruption for nearly every single healer out there, with the exception of Holy Paladin. Now, if Flash of Insight is not available, it's going to be a lot harder to determine what's going to be the biz. Like, you look at this chart and you have to say, Holy Paladin has it easy. Ineffable Truth is really, really strong for them. For other healers, you kind of have to choose. Now, there's a reason why I included Void Ritual and Leech. I had these spaces here filled in with my corruption choices, or at least my prediction on what people would have went, but I decided to remove it because I feel that people are gonna misconstrue this chart and they're gonna go for it no matter what. So this is why I included Void Ritual and Leech at the bottom. because I feel this is a very solid choice. If you're really confused about your stats, if you're confused about stat procs and things like that, going Void Ritual or Leech on your healer is legitimately a very solid choice in raid situations, no matter what you do. Now the problem is, if you decide to go Leech Corruption in raids, Leech Corruption is gonna drop a lot of value in Mythic Plus, or at least I would never use Leech Corruption in Mythic Plus. And second of all, there is a breakpoint. If you stack a lot of Leech as a healer, at certain points it's gonna lose a lot of value. So you don't want to go overboard. So let's talk about Shamans as well. Let's talk about raid corruptions besides Flash of Insight. So first of all, stats. This is what I say here. Gets better the more of that stat you have. So all of a sudden you look at the corruption system and you see things like Expedient, you see Masterful, you see Crit, Severe, and things like that. It increases the amount of crit you gain from all the sources. These become stronger the more of that stat you have. So this is why a lot of mages go with, there's a lot of other reasons, but fire mages go with Masterful. They go with Masterful, BM Hunters go with Crit because of how the resets work and the cooldowns, and they get as many Severe as possible. So all of a sudden, like for example, increases the amount of critical strike you gain from all the sources by 12%. If you have 40% crit, 12% of that is going to be pretty big. If you have 5% of crit, 12% of that is going to be minuscule. So all of a sudden, you'll start noticing that if your healing class has a lot of stats, and a lot of people are throwing around like, you know, if you have over 30% or whatever, and if your class enjoys that stat, and if you have a lot of that stat, all of a sudden stat increases might actually become your biz or very strong corruptions to use. If you don't have Flash of Insight, for example, I want to make a guess here. If you play a Resto Shaman in raid situations, you'll probably have a lot of crit. If you play Upwelling Monk in raid situations, you'll probably have a lot of crit because crit and burst are very strong. So I'm assuming, let's say you have 40% crit or somewhere close to that as a Resto Shaman and Upwelling Monk. You might be able to achieve those numbers without corruption by using things like Heart of Darkness, Azeroth traits. Heart of Darkness, Azeroth trait is very, very strong, and a lot of healers might even have 2 or 3 of these. These increase your secondary stats if you have over 25 corruption. So all of a sudden, let's say you're Resto Shaman, Upwelling Monk, you have 40, 35% crit. There is a high chance that using corruption that's going to increase or severe might be actually a very solid choice to use as your best corruption in raid situations. But if you look at other healers, like for example Discipline Priest, they might not be stacking haste or crit to a very, very high extent, because I feel a lot of the stats for Discipline Priest are pretty good. So maybe they're gonna go for something like proc chances, like haste proc, Racing Pulse, very solid choice. Maybe they're gonna go with Mastery proc. Now you have to keep in mind that haste proc and mastery proc are solid choices because if your class enjoys them, because your spells and abilities have a chance to proc them. Versatility proc is taking damage has a chance to increase it. So a lot of the times people will value the way that you proc versatility a lot lower or a little bit lower than mastery or haste, because your spells and abilities, it scales better. To the same extent, crit can be viewed somewhat like that, but it's a different mechanic. But generally speaking, if you're a Resto Shaman and crit and verse are your most solid choices, you might want to go for that kind of proc as well. So that's why I say I'm spending so much time. It's so difficult to really give you the best answer, because it's going to be depending on the stats. So like I mentioned, Shamans, Upwelling Monks, if they have a lot of crit, they might want to go with Severe and see where the stats or the stat priority is going to take them. Now, if you have Discipline Priest, they might want to go for your haste procs and things like that. Generally speaking, their stat priority is pretty good in raids, or a lot of the stats are relatively equal, so they might want to go with the proc. Holy Priest, again, a lot of Holy Priests will probably want to go with Ineffable Truth. Ineffable Truth is very, very, very strong choice. If Flash of Insight is not there, Ineffable Truth is going to be very, very solid, because a lot of the times you have to look at it. The Holy Priest has all these Holy Word spells, where there's a large cooldown. Your filler abilities reduce Holy Word spells. Now, the more Holy Word spells you use, the less cooldown you're going to get on your Holy Word Salvation, which is your massive cooldown. All of a sudden, if you have enough Ineffable Truth corruptions out there, you might be able to get multiple Holy Word Salvations in a raid boss fight, which makes it absolutely insanely strong. So that's why I feel a lot of Holy Priests are going to be stacking Ineffable Truth. If they're not going to be stacking Ineffable Truth, they might get some of that Mastery procs, maybe Severe and things like that, depending on your stats. Druids, again, super hard for a Druid. I feel Druid is one of the hardest ones because you can go for your haste proc as well for racing pulse and things like that, but it's gonna lead to more mana issues. So it depends what content you're doing. Are you doing farm content where you want logs? Haste might be good, expedient might be good, and things like that. But if you're doing progression content, you might want to go for your mastery proc, maybe your crit proc and things like that. I generally think that if Flash of Insight is not going to be available for Resto Druids, they're just gonna go with a mixture of all stats. I honestly feel they're going to go with a mixture of all stats, something similar to a Discipline Priest and things like that. Because every stat has a lot of value and no stat is insanely higher than anything than other stats. So this is why I feel it's going to be really hard to optimize your corruption for raiding as Resto Druid. In Mythic Plus, I feel Gushing Wounds. I feel in Mythic Plus, Resto Druids, a lot of times I've been running a lot of haste. Like I run over 30% haste. So I feel Expedient is going to be very strong as well in Mythic Plus if you feel you need that extra healing. Because you have to remember, haste increases healing and damage. Remember that, that's very, very important. So Paladins, I honestly feel a lot of Paladins are going to be running Ineffable Truth all over the place. Now, generally speaking, you only need 80% Ineffable Truth, or at least you need 80% cooldown reduction before you want to start using Ineffable Truth. But is it worth going over 80%? A lot of Holy Paladins are running crazy amount of Ineffable Truth because there are certain breakpoints with haste and Ineffable Truth where, let's say for example, your Wings proc and your Ineffable Truth procs and you can do Holy Shock, Holy Shock. You don't even have to do Holy Shock, Crusader Strike, Holy Shock type of deal. So, and then to the same extent, there's a lot of different breakpoints with more Ineffable Truth. So I feel people are going to be experimenting, people are going to be trying to get as many Ineffable Truths as they can. And I am going to be trying to get as many as I can and trying to see if I can get an additional, maybe 2 additional cooldowns in a fight. You have to remember the way that Ineffable Truth works. If you have your main cooldowns, which is Wings and Holy Avenger on cooldown and Ineffable Truth procs, the cooldown is going to be reduced on your Wings or on your Holy Avenger. So all of a sudden, on a fight where you might get 2 Wings, you might get 3 now. That extra cooldown is going to be huge because you know Holy Paladin is all about those Wings on Holy Avengers. Now Upwelling Monk is the same kind of deal. Like I mentioned before, crit verse, we're probably gonna see like I mentioned, Severe and things like that. Now Rising Mist Monk is going to be a little, or I'm not 100% sure on it, because after the nerf, Ineffable Truth is still pretty solid choice. So you might want to get a certain amount of Ineffable Truth on Rising Mist. The sad fact is that I feel majority of monks who play Rising Mist in raid situations have swapped over to Upwelling build, because I feel that the HPS difference between Rising Mist and Upwelling is not that big anymore after the nerf. So a lot of the monks I feel are like, including myself, I feel like, what's the point of playing Rising Mist, which I feel is substantially more difficult to play than Upwelling? What's the point of playing this build, trying to get my Rising Sunkick resets, getting these windows where you can go Mana Tea and Vivify Bursts and stuff like that? Why should I try this and really pay attention for an increase or for the HPS that is somewhat similar to Upwelling? And Upwelling, let's be completely honest, any Upwelling monk main here, it's just Essence Font. It's just pressing Essence Font once in a while. I don't want to hate, but the difference between the 2 builds in terms of HPS is not that big. But the difference in terms of gameplay and how hard it is to master one, it's pretty substantial. So this is why I feel like a lot of people are playing Upwelling right now. But generally speaking, this video is way too long. I really apologize for that. This is my estimation on what is going to be strong. This is very important. This is very important. The secondaries of the corruption that's going to be really strong for certain healers in raids is going to be, in my opinion, going to depending on how much of a certain stat you have. Like I mentioned, Shamans and Monks multiple times throughout this, mentioned Holy Paladins. I feel Holy Paladins have the easiest time right now. They have the easiest time. Ineffable Truth for basically all of the content. And it's very simple. We'll have to see if Flash of Insight is going to be available. If it's not going to be available, if Flash of Insight is not going to be available to buy, it's going to be a lot more difficult to figure out what is your best corruption as a healer in raid environments. So check out the video. I might update it later on. This is a very early preview. After I have more time to check out the logs and things like that, I might update it if I see if Flash of Insight is not available and things like that. Thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know if you enjoy this type of content. If you do enjoy this type of content, subscribe and things like that. It really helps out the channel. Believe me, it helps me to do more of these videos. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in my next